So today we're working on creating quadratic equations, or in other words, writing a quadratic equation or function when we're given different information. In this video, we're working on how to write a quadratic function in vertex form. Okay, so first of all, we have to remember what vertex form is. Okay, so vertex form of a quadratic equation is y equals, you're going to have a number up front, so it's going to have an a, and that represents a number, and then you're going to have x, and remember it's minus h, and so h is part of your vertex. Okay, so a parentheses x minus h, and then that parentheses is being squared, and then you're going to add it to another number, and the k actually has to do with your vertex as well. Okay, so something that we talked about vertex form is the reason it's called that is because if you take this number right here that's inside the parentheses with the x and you change the sign of it, so like if it was negative it would become positive. If you put that in a coordinate and then take this number right here and put it as the y value of that coordinate. Now, you don't have to change the sign of this number, but that right there, that coordinate is the vertex of that parabola. And remember, the vertex of a parabola is the turning point of it. Okay, so if they ask you, and they're going to give you various information, but if they ask you to write it in vertex form, you essentially have to find kind of two different pieces of information to put it in that form. So you're going to have to find, or you're going to need to find the vertex. So you're going to have to find that turning point of the parabola, or that U shape. And then the other thing that you're going to have, and you're going to actually use this to find that number that goes up front, is you have to know another point that U, or that parabola, goes through. Okay, so you not only have to have the vertex, but you have to have some other point on the parabola. Okay, and so sometimes they'll just give it to you, sometimes they might give you a graph, and if they give you a graph, all you have to do is just find a point that it goes through. And then once you have those two pieces of information, you'll actually be able to plug it in this equation, and then eventually you'll kind of simplify it to where you'll be able to find the a, because remember there's a number that goes right here. You'll be able to have the vertex, and so you'll be able to plug in these three numbers, and then you'll have your equation. Okay, so let's step through how to actually do one of these problems. So in this example, it says write a quadratic function in vertex form, so we know we have to put it in that form, given the following information. So notice in this problem, they're giving us a graph, okay? And so if we have to put it in vertex form, our first goal is to find these two pieces of information. So I have to know what the vertex is, so I'm going to try to find that. And then I have to have at least some other point that it goes through, okay? So if I look at my graph, if I see I've got my U here, or my parabola, I'm going to look for the turning point. And so if I look, and it even points it out for us, they don't always point it out for us, but if I look, that point right there is my turning point of my parabola. So the coordinate of that is my vertex. And so you can either kind of look, it's at 1, 3, or they give it to you. So you already know your vertex, so you'll just kind of label that to the side, so you'll have it. And remember, that's the h and the k in that equation. Okay, so we'll actually end up plugging it in just a little bit. But the other thing that you have to know is a point that it goes through. Now, you can pick any point that's on this parabola that it goes through. If they point out a point for you, you're more than welcome to use that one. But like if you notice, and I do try to pick easy points to deal with, like I could also pick this coordinate right here, so it's at 0, 2. So I could take that point because it goes through that point. I could take this point over here. I could take, that's another good point down there. So you can find any point that it goes through, but you're going to use that point to actually help you find this number up front in a minute. Okay, so now since they pointed out this one for me, and I can see that it goes through that point. I'm just going to use that point, okay? And so how do you use that point to actually write the equation? Well, if we were given all three of these numbers to begin with, we could just plug it in and have our equation. But notice we know what h and k are. Remember, that's from our vertex. So if I take and plug in this 1 where the h is and then this 3 where the k is, that'll be that part of the equation. But what I don't know is this number up front. So that's actually why we have to have this other point, okay? So once you find all this information, what you're actually going to do first, before you can actually write this in vertex form, is you're going to plug in all of this into that equation, and you're going to solve for a first. Okay, so how do you do that? Well, remember, the 1 in your vertex is your h, so that 1 is going to go where the h is in the equation. The 3 is your k, so that's going to go where the k is. And now, where does this point come in? Well, notice, remember, I talked about a second ago, we're looking for a. And so you're actually going to plug this coordinate in for the x and the y. Okay, so like notice, this is your x value, so that's going to go in for x. And then this is your y value, so that goes in for y. Okay, so all you have to do is copy your little equation down. So I'm going to copy my vertex form down. And then I'm going to plug in all of these numbers, and then I'll be able to solve and find what a is, okay? So my y, notice, is -1. So instead of y, I'm going to put -1. I'm looking for a, so I'll leave the a the way it is. And then I'm going to plug in numbers here. So this is x minus h. So my x, I see right here, is -1. So it'd be -1 minus whatever h is. So if I look over here, my h is 1. So it'd be -1, and then notice that's being squared. And then I have to add k. Well, that'd be, my k is 3, so I have to add 3. Okay, so now from here I have to use kind of what I know about solving equations, and I'm going to solve for a. Okay, so if you remember, order of operations, got to do inside the parentheses first and then the exponents next. So this -1 is going to come down, my a is going to come down, and I'm going to go ahead and do this part. So I've got -1 minus 1, which is -2, and then I'm about to square it. So it'd be like -2 squared, and so -2 squared is like -2 times -2, which would give me 4. Okay, so that would end up being like times 4 right there. Now, if you think about like variables, when I'm multiplying by a number, typically we'll put that in front. So I'm actually going to erase that, and I'm going to put that 4 in front of my a, okay, because a is kind of like my variable. And so that's that part right there. And then I have that plus 3, okay, so it just comes down. Now I've got to finish solving, so I've got to get a by itself. Well, I got to get the 3 away and the 4, so I usually start with this so that I can get that to the other side. So 3 minus 3 is 0. And then over here I've got -1 minus 3, which is -4. And then my equals comes down, my 4a comes down. Then from there, I just got to finish solving. So I'm multiplying by 4, so I have to divide by 4 on both sides. And so I'm going to come over here, a would equal, well, -4 over 4 is -1. And then 4 over 4 was 1, so that's where my a came from. So I just used this information to help me find a. So once I find a, now I have everything that I need to be able to write the vertex form. So now I just take that a and I'm going to plug it in for this, the number in front in my equation, and then I just have to plug in my vertex, and I will have the equation of that quadratic. Okay, so my vertex form would be y equals, well, my a was -1, so it'd be -1 times parentheses x minus, so x minus, and then whatever h is. So look at your h was 1. So that's what goes there, and then we have squared, and then plus k. Well, it'd be plus, my k was 3. So the whole reason you go to the side and do this is just to find that number up front. So once you find that number up front, Then you go back and you just plug in those three things. And there you have your vertex form.